Okay. Hi, everybody. Let's see if this works. Hi, everybody. Today is June 27th. I'm Aaron Kirkenberger. This is the Kubernetes SIG Testing meeting. So just giving a brief update on the 1.7 release status. We're planning on, I believe, cutting tomorrow, or certainly the next deadline is that if you have any release notes, you need to get them in by noon Pacific time tomorrow. And as I was saying, the main area from a testing perspective is that upgrade tests seem to be causing some amount of flail because this seems to be the first time we had been attempting to automate upgrading from 2 versions behind up to 1.7. So we've been ignoring those errors and focusing mostly on the errors that were happening from 1.6 to 1.7. A couple blockers had revealed themselves yesterday. Were mostly taken care of. The pinball meeting for that is going on right now, so I'm not sure what today's status is. Also, fun little side note: the launch GitHub plugin that we had enabled a while back to add a needs SIG label to any issue that didn't have an owning SIG label attached to it. We're now down to like 10 issues from about 1,100 issues last week. So great job for those of us who were helping out triage. That's all the 1.7 stuff that I have today. Eric, it looks like, or Michelle, are you around to demo test grid?
Yes, we are here. Michelle, do you want to? I don't know. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Why don't you come use my computer?
Okay.
And let me.
Do you have the link or?
No, hold on. You come over here.
Okay.
Should that be working?
No, I don't.
Does this work? Okay, cool.
Can you see that, Aaron?
Yep, looks good here.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm audible, all good?
Yes.
Okay, cool. In that case, yeah, I'll just give a brief presentation on test grid, and then if there are any questions or like suggestions at the end, we'll stop for them. But feel free to ask if there's anything that's unclear. But yeah, so I assume people here are familiar with test grid use. We can start in on like basically a short overview of test grid and how it works, and then go into some features that like we'll give a basic overview as well as like some of the options that are less well known, and then a little bit on some of the future work we're also planning. So just to start, what is test grid? It is a grid of tests aptly named. So we currently have a instance for a bunch of the Kubernetes tests, which exists at K8's test grid. Test grid's main features are that we have the update we have the update writing a state such that everything is pre-computed and easy and fast to access. There's a bunch of things for being able to sort, filter, and otherwise like change the state for analyzing how test results have popped up. We integrate some stuff with the test results from Kubernetes as well as other things from GitHub, like the commit IDs and searching for regressions. And then we have a lot of options in the configuration for actually like changing both view options as well as like other options for like viewing the test results themselves. And then the link for the actual stuff in test infra for the test grid configuration and checks as well. So briefly, test grid mainly has a separated front end and then the actual updates. So there's a thing on the back end that basically will go through all of the configuration for all of the test groups, update all of those separately, write the state to cloud storage, And then the front end will just pull those objects from cloud storage separately and then render all of that. So we can go in a bit into the actual features. This is still something we would like to improve on for speed, but currently we do like manage to serve tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of results within seconds.
What's the result defined as here, real quick? Is it like a cell in this grid? Is it a row or is it a column?
Sorry, not sure what you mean.
It's a cell.
So when you say result, is it like the set of all results for a given commit, or is it like a specific test result for a specific test, like a cell?
Right. So each cell is its own test result. The column would be the all of the results from a particular commit or build, and then the row itself is for that test. So across history. And then left click to open the logs. Right click will allow filing a bug and gives another option to open the logs.
I've always questioned this, while we're in the mode of interrupting, is the stack that's there for vetting, right? Like, because this is a particular version, right? But there's no reference to the entire stack set that was created for this, because right now there's a possibility to change the stack along the way when you're doing some of the tests, but you don't have the exact versions of every single dependency in the graph there. So which version of Docker are you running? Which version image is being tested? What version of etcd are you using?
So I believe we have a little bit of custom information right now for what things are running. If that is not currently in the configuration, there's an option which I'll also show later for like adding a little bit more information into the column headers. So if that information is possible to fetch in test grid, then we can configure that to show like this was running at a particular version. It just has to be passed to the logs somewhere.
If we can get that
slide a little later. This one's actually one that I will be adding shortly for external, but you should be able to configure alerts for if you have a test that is failing over a specified like amount or threshold, being able to get alerts automatically emailed to like specified email addresses on, hey, these tests are failing. We also have like if we detect between like X and Y commit, we detected that a failure happened, then we also will auto-populate a link by the test that actually shows, hey, here's a link to a regression search in GitHub to show differences between these two commits. By default, we have the column headers will show the date, time, and build number that the datetime build number, that the test actually ran at, with the row showing the test name or target. And this was going into the thing I was talking about earlier. The commit ID is actually a custom column header that's added in the configuration for all of the tests for the Kubernetes test grid. So something else that like, if we have the information available for other kinds of versions or whatnot to track on the grid, we should be able to add it via similar configuration. There's a couple of things you can do to change the view in order to like better look at some of the results. So for instance, you can change the width. This is actually completely customizable via the URL parameter, but we also have set widths for like very, very compact at 5 pixels versus like the normal one, which as you saw before is something like 80. And then also like a sort of compact one as well. You can also like under options do things like sorting or filtering. So like only including some test results that match a certain word, or being able to sort by failures or flakiness. You can also, if we have the information available, basically, if you're running a bunch of the same tests with a matrix, like for instance, this one is running against a bunch of different versions, then we can include that after the test in order to easily differentiate them when you're viewing the results. This also means that under options, you could, for instance, group together all similar tests with the same target, and then also like be able to expand that and view if we have failures, like is it failing against one particular version or for everyone. A couple more sort of recent things. There's the ability to add descriptions for tabs, so you can easily see like this tab's purpose is for this. There's also no current examples, but you can add notifications for tabs in order to like display a like bright yellow bar at the top that will say there is currently a either outage or failure or some important notice that you'd like to display to people. And then with no current examples, there's basically a summary for like what the actual notification is, as well as like a link you can add optionally for here's like more information you can find on it, like a GitHub issue or something similar. We also have a summary tab that basically just gives a overview of a bunch of the test statistics. So for instance, we have what percentage of tests were failing within the last week, as well as more on the actual specific failures. So like test target, number of times failing consecutively when we first got into failing. As noted, like I will be adding that shortly for being able to get that via email, and then we will also have a Chrome extension for that later this year. There's also currently some graphs you can show, although I believe that by default the only one is test duration. But you can view that under the graph menu, basically like how long does this test take to run, and see changes over time. We have a value for each test result. And then if there are like a bunch of these options you'd like to enable by default for a tab, you can store that in the base options option for configuration, and then just have that come up every time somebody wants to view that tab in particular. So for instance, this one has include filter by regex volume to show only test targets that have volume in their target name. Make the width slightly smaller so we see more test results at a time. And then also show by default the test duration minutes for how long the tests are taking. And then for some of the future things we'd like to work on, there's a lot, honestly, but we're working on tackling a bunch of these at once. So in future, we'd like to open source more of the test grid beyond just the configuration, and also take advantage of Kubernetes to like actually make this a Kubernetes application. So both the updater and front end separately in open source. There's also a lot of things that like we recognize are harder to discover in test grid that we'd like to make easier to use. And then also some features like notifications of the configuration. We'd also like to make that like both easier to discover and use. There's also like, so the aforementioned adding alerts for failing tests, so people can get alerts when they actually have tests on tabs that they need to pay attention to. Making a better summary page with more data, as well as like a better call out for which tests need attention. And then a better ability to look between dashboards for like comparing results or the status of, say, different tests across dashboards. And then as always, we'd like to make the update cycle faster and make it faster to actually load all of the results on the client. So yeah. Configuration stuff lives in test infra, test grid config, and then the actual Kubernetes instance is available at that link.
Thank you. That was a really awesome presentation. I know I personally learned a couple things.
Awesome.
So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that like we need to make a little clearer, but
yeah. So one thing I plan on helping out with is trying to add a description to the litany of tabs we have for the Kubernetes test grid right now, because pretty much none of them have descriptions. There are also a good chunk of them that seem to be stale, so I think we as a community need to come up with a list of policies to be able to enforce, like is this a thing worth cluttering up the main dashboard with if there have been no test results in the past month or 6 months or however long, right?
Right.
One thing that I gather that the numbers here are very centric to a specific test result. So specific test case for a specific commit, time, date, whatever. One metric that would be useful from the release team's perspective is to compute percentage of failures as it relates to the job itself. So that percentage that's shown on the summary tab right now looks really, really low. Like a lot of the jobs are like, well, only 3% of the things have failed in the past week, right?
Right.
But that's the number of test cases times the number of job runs, I think.
Right.
And what might be more actionable if we start to assign ownership of these jobs to different SIGs or people is to say the job as a whole, so the number of job runs, what's that percentage of flakiness or failure rate, right?
Yeah. And I think actually I have that tracked for building in the enhanced summary, being able to see both like overall test cases failure as well as the like percentage of builds or jobs that have failed, since like multiple people do want the ability to like view as a like per run status or stats.
So one question I selfishly would have as I start doing these updates is what's sort of the life cycle of I make a change to the config. How long do I expect before I see that change appear on the live test grid instance?
Currently, that should be somewhere around however long it takes to update, which I believe is currently at somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes for the Kubernetes instance.
Okay. Is there, like, where would I go look to get feedback that that update has happened or been run or whatever? Aside from me looking for my expected config, right? Is there like a log or a status page or something I can look at?
Sort of. So we have actually, I think it's shown on the summary as one of the things. The last update right now is like when the last update was run on the tab or test group. I believe it's also, let me see if I can find. No, I don't think it's showing on any of the screenshots I got. But if you go to the tab itself, it should also pop up with when the last update happened.
Okay.
Depending on the view, though. But,
another question I've seen appear every once in a while is that the data itself in test grid seems to be stale compared to the recency of Google Cloud Storage buckets or whatnot. I'm not sure like what the appropriate escalation path is for that. Is that something the test infra role or the build cop should be in charge of watching and kicking off or whatever?
Eric, do you have a better answer for that, or?
Can you ask that again, Aaron?
So I've heard questions sometimes come up, maybe it hasn't happened lately, I'm not sure, where people have noticed that test grid seems out of date compared to, say, Kubernetes. So they notice that there's more recent data in the buckets that is being reflected in the test grid display. And so at that point, it seems like some component behind the scenes hasn't run or maybe is running slowly. And the question is, what's the escalation path?
Yeah, I would say to contact, say it's sort of like ping one of us on Slack. If it's more, if it's less than 15 minutes, like we would expect a 15-minute delay since Kubernetes instant. So it should be that, if a new result passes, it should show up immediately in Kubernetes since that just scans GCS. And then 15 minutes later, it'll show up in test grid. And if that, if it's substantially longer than that, then contact us. For a while, there was a bug in the summary update where it would stop updating the summary. And so that could, just get like days behind. That was a bug on our side that we found and fixed. And so, yeah, so if you're seeing that, let us know because that shouldn't be happening. But we are aware that the updates are slower than we would like them to be. We'd like them to be, a minute rather than 15.
Yeah. So, update cycle is basically like the latency for a bunch of stuff in test grid. So yeah, anything that tends to take over, anything that is more than 15 minutes stale is definitely concerning.
Absolutely. Like I'm on board with all that. I'm asking questions from the perspective of, in the meantime, where can we go look to like answer these questions to make sure people aren't needlessly being pinged. And I also asked the question from the perspective of attempting to staff out or fill out the build cop role to non-Googlers, understanding like what privileges will and will not allow that role to do. Anyway, that's all the questions I had. This was super informative.
Awesome.
Anybody else? Bueller? Okay, excellent. I think on that note, next thing I see on the agenda are a couple items from Tim St. Clair. Tim, do you want to carry on from here?
That Eric, Jacob had pinged you regarding this. So I don't know what the status is, but it's been there for 21 days. And for 1.8, I'd really like to see that be the test infra pull number 2976.
Okay.
I'll just post the link. It's basically pre-submit job to have a pull request for every PR using kubeadm builds. So I think I'm just requesting resolution on that one. The second one was discuss examples. There's so many issues going on. I don't know if anyone's got the state of what's going on with examples. I would love to rip them out of tests. I don't think they should belong in tests in any way, shape, or form. And we've talked about this many times. I don't know what the latest state is, but I'm inclined to just kill them all and let God sort them out, because you always have the history for them. And we're on 1.8, so we're on a clean cycle. Are there thoughts there?
Have you talked with anybody from SIG Apps about this?
There's a couple of initiatives going on, right? But the reality is they've gone through many cycles. And we're responsible for tests, and they're put in a test, and they're not maintained, right?
So I am like leaning on the, kill them all and let God sort them out thing for sure. But in the interest of like transparency and making sure we have some kind of discussion, I think it's worth asking the SIG Apps mailing list or channel or having some kind of discussion in that forum, because I believe they're trying to also kind of kill all the unmaintained examples and focus on a more stable set that people are actually taking ownership of and moving them to a separate repo. And so I think the compromise might be ensuring that there's good, clean testing of those examples in that repo as owned by that SIG. And then we can sort of close out the rest, right? Because there's a similar issue where like, what should we do with this issue for the, let's just say Kafka example that nobody has volunteered to maintain? Should we leave the issue open for somebody who might want to come in and maintain the Kafka example, right? My answer would be no, but let's make sure we've had the discussion and have kept track of it someplace so that if somebody comes back later and does want to do something about it, they can follow the breadcrumbs to this collection of stale things that need to be picked back up. So I would try and do the same sort of approach for the tests, but with a hard deadline of like, if not by X, they're out of here.
Yep, I'm in agreement. I'd like to hard stop on that.
Does that sound fair?
Go ahead. Ryan seems like he wants to say something.
Yeah, I actually saw some recent PRs where they were rewriting the Cassandra tests from examples, like a proper stateful set test, I think. So someone is working on them, I think. We just need to track them down and talk to them about maybe disable the other ones for now.
But that one would be like a great example where I think there was this concept that like, okay, so we could test that stateful states are doing upgrades in the abstract and the upgrade functionality works as expected. Or we could upgrade a real world application and prove that upgrades are working because they're working with a real world application, right? Using that real world application feels very not core nucleus, whatever word we want to use. I get the motivation, but that still feels to me like something that belongs outside, and that the upgrade functionality we would prefer to see exercised via really good integration tests or really good unit test coverage. The perception that you have to fight against is the perception that we haven't really proven that upgrades work for really real until we've done it with an end-to-end test with an actual big bloated application. I'm not sure the best way to counteract that, although I'm definitely in favor, right, of the more unit tests that run faster so we get better signal more quickly.
So what I'll do with that one is I will follow up with SIG apps and try to report back to this SIG next meeting. But I'm definitely going to give the hard stop at the 1/8 cycle, because we've been talking about this now for eons, and we get PRs that people ask me to review and whatnot, and it's not even worth the bandwidth to get the email, right? Because I get enough of it, and so does everyone else. The last one was, we don't publish a versioned Kubernetes end-to-end container. This will become a priority, and I'm going to just request that someone from this SIG, other than me, I'll probably put a PR together because I already created one. And I don't know who has ACLship rights to push containers.
What do you mean by versioned? Because like we don't really have the concept of test infra isn't versioned.
It's not going to be test infra. It'll be the way the Hypercube container is created, I would do it the exact same way and use the same versioning semantics that the rest of the system uses. So it'd be part of the quick release target, so make quick release, and it would create the container, but somebody has to push.
What container?
A new one. It would probably be like kube end-to-end in the main.
So this is where, Tim, I believe you are asking for an artifact to run end-to-end tests that is a container that has all of the dependencies necessary, and you just run that container, and that's running the end-to-end tests against cluster of choice. And yes. I would posit that Eric's response might be, but we have kubetest. That is the single artifact that runs the end-to-end tests. Is that sort of the discussion we're having here?
Yeah, the problem is it's not versioned. The version semantics are not the same. So we either, one, we do same versioning, so that way when a person gets when a person tries to get the release target version of an image container that has the end-to-end tests, it gets the exact one, right? That's pretty much the only requirement, I guess. Yeah. Is that when I get a release of Kubernetes, I need to have one that's been tagged for that release.
So my confusion here is, and up until today, right, the artifact with which you test Kubernetes is a binary called e2e.test that comes in a tarball that's versioned just the same and built at the same time that the tarball is for the main Kubernetes release. And I feel like you are asking that is not sufficient. It must be an image.
It must be an image that is non-Google Cloud specific, because this will be like a requirement for folks going forwards. Otherwise, there's going to be a proliferation of containers that exist when people are trying to run conformance tests. So without this, there is no canonical location for anyone to reference to say that I have a valid Kubernetes, right, when they're executing their tests. Because it's not well versioned according to the release cycle. It didn't come from upstream. They had to create it their own, right? So the purpose of this is to create a well-defined artifact that everyone can reference as part of what will be eventually the CNCF conformance efforts.
Hold on a second. I'm going to move rooms.
Okay. I mean, to me, that sounds like I agree. I guess I anticipate with CNC using the word conformance a lot, that there will be floodgates open and a lot of people saying, how do I test my cluster to make sure that it is conformant? And the answer right now is there is a well-defined artifact. It's that e2e.test binary. And you can use the kubetest program to actually stand up the cluster, run the tests against the cluster, or you can even use it to just run the tests against the cluster. But the tarball that is exploded and used for those tests and that test data is a well-versioned thing that can be referred to. Now, I agree that the user experience may not be as great as Docker run kube2e.
The
But
problem that will exist is people will create their own containers. There's no canonical location anymore, right? So even because the way we're defining tests is either inside or out of cluster. And ideally, we would have it introspective, running on the cluster, running the tests. So you couldn't just have the tarball running on the cluster. You'd have to build a container, and then you'd have to define the spec. So at some point, this is an end run. It will happen, right? And I'm going to force the issue because it has to happen. And other people agree that this has to happen. The question I'm trying to state is that we as a SIG, we should be responsible for artifacts, right? And I will push a PR to help create an artifact, or we can version the one that's from test infra and remove the Google Cloud dependencies that exist inside there. Because we're going to need to create a consumable that other people can use to validate clusters. They can create their own artifact, but then you get into lots of weird scenarios, right? From a how do you vendor this thing and support it, right?
yeah, so I guess like I'm not disagreeing with any of that. For whatever reason, I appear to be taking issue with the stance that there is no way of testing the clusters with a well-defined set of artifacts today, right? There it is. If you're saying that people won't stop until they've built a container to do that for them, and if we don't build that container first, we're always going to be chasing down like, well, how did you build your container? What container did you use? The fact that we happen to be using, well, specifically Google happens to be using a container because Prow kicks off pods that have containers. And so as a matter of convenience, it happens to have some things baked in that are Google CI specific in addition to Kubernetes E2E testing stuff. The question would become, would we want to start with that and remove the Google CI specific stuff, or would we want to attempt to make our own container in anticipation of or trying to shortcut people who are going to do this on their own? Did I summarize that well enough for Eric, who just joined back in? I'm kind of curious what your take is.
My take is that, each release of Kubernetes doesn't have its, there's not like a 1.8 version of Bash. And so kubekins or kube tests to me doesn't really seem, I think I definitely think that we do need to provide a way of, hey, I just put together a Kubernetes cluster that's 1.5 and I want a way to validate that this conforms to a 1.5 cluster. The thing is that, essentially the way you do that is you download the Kubernetes test tarball for that 1.5 release, and then you download head of kubetest, or really any version of kubetest, and call kubetest with that. And so if we want to package all of this into a container, which definitely I think I would agree with you, Aaron, that it probably shouldn't be the kubekins container, since I think that's more for like our CI purposes. I think we just need to think about how we want to do that.
So I've already done it myself, right? Like I already have a container. It's already been wrapped. It has conformance flags as default envs, for it. And I think I would just make a pull request to the main line and put it in a similar fashion to where the hypercube image is created, because that's the only one that's like analogously created. The other ones, the different component containers are created in a different way, right?
Yeah,
but that's,
it'd be nice if we saw like a design or proposal or something about this, so that we could.
I'll just create a PR. Honestly, it's not that complicated. So.
Okay.
I guess I would like to see an issue that sort of lays out the broader scope. PR references that issue.
There is one.
Okay. And I would say let's attempt to make this a 1.8 item that you or Heptio owns.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Because I think it's probably a good first cut, but it might be something that we would want to iterate on if we want to try and make it more of a de facto standard, right? I don't want this to be yet another standard way of running Kubernetes tests.
I want there to be one way that the community uses, right? And how the internal test infra does their business is their business, right? I'm not going to dictate what Google does in their test infra, but how the community runs their tests, I do think we should standardize, right? Because there will be there already is an infinite level of complexity that exists, right?
Okay, we're once again over time, for which I apologize. We still have something on the agenda about the 1.8 roadmap and people actually committing to stuff on that. Would we like to stick around and talk about that today, or is that something we'd like to pick up next week?
I think, do we have anything on the agenda for next week? I'd be fine moving it to, I'd fine talking about it now. I would also be fine, waiting till next week.
Next week is the 4th of July for people living in the U.S.
Oh, come on. What's the issue there?
I don't have one. I have people living in the U.S.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to make everybody sit through and read through the whole doc. I noticed that a number of folks have actually signed up for issues, mostly Google Tests Infra team. I signed up for a couple. I have committed to a couple things. And my proposal would be that for pretty much everything we have on this doc, I want to see us have an issue in the test infra repo and have these names as assignees on those issues. The remaining issues can then be left around and put into a next milestone sort of thing, right? So we can actually create a V18 milestone and then say, this is what we SIG testing have committed to. And then community meeting after July the 4th, or I don't know if it's going to get canceled that week or whatnot. We can actually present that as like, hey, here's the plan. How does that sound to everybody?
I think that us following the standard pattern of other SIGs of actually curating the list inside of the issues and triaging that list as the cycle goes through is imperative. So,
I mean, the important thing for me isn't just what we have for 1.8, but that we have a list of suggestions for and beyond, or a list of, and if you would like to help out, here's where and how you can help out. I believe, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a fix-it coming up in the next week or two. That's why I really want to make sure we actually have this documented. So some of the long-standing itchy stuff or stuff that's in this roadmap that would best be done when nothing else is happening, make sure we've got that on paper, so to speak, so we can actually do this the right way.
Yeah, I think, going through and creating issues for all of the items sounds good. And yeah, having a backlog also sounds good, and curating it to sort of have an idea of what are we thinking for 1.8, what are things for people to work on. Yeah, I also think it'd be, I think it'd be nice if we had more, if we got more people to sign up for things as well.
Okay, cool. I don't feel a strong need to keep folks around any longer unless there's any specific item on that roadmap somebody wanted to bring up and discuss real briefly. It looks like an awesome list, and I'm excited to actually get to work on it. All right, cool. As an action item, Eric, I'll follow up with you offline to figure out the best way to get all these issues created. And I think that's all I have.
Thanks.
Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Happy Tuesday.